My name is Lily Pierce. I'm 27 years old. I'm a lay servant in the United Methodist Church, and I have a disability called Friedreich Ataxia that does affect my speech, as you've likely already noticed. The plant of the day is this gorgeous little peperomia. Kinda looks like my skin after I get a long shower. It's honestly a pretty easy plant so far. I sit it right beside the window, water it once a week. It's not super fickle and thirsty like a lot of my plants are. I like this little guy. So today we're going to try to answer the age-old question.
Is money the root of all evil?
It's a popular phrase that's based on a verse in the Bible. 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and in their eagerness to be rich, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pains. I wonder how many people have pierced themselves with many pains by lusting after materialistic things and making their life be so much about those things. And at the same time, I wonder how many have pierced themselves with many pains just trying to make enough money to survive. I think it's important to note before we really even get into this that things are so much different now, especially for us who live in first world countries, than they were for people in the Bible. And when we think of the wealthy or the rich, usually we don't include ourselves in that. But really, anyone who lives in America is probably wealthy compared to anyone who lived in the Bible who wasn't a king. And even then, we have a lot of things that ancient kings didn't have. So as we go through this, don't exclude yourself, and I won't exclude myself, from thinking about people who have money. So is it true that money is the root of all evil? Well, my opinion, and also my interpretation of scripture, is basically mostly yes, but maybe no. If we examine the verse closely, we'll see that it doesn't say that money in and of itself is the root of evil, but the love of money. We need to understand what the love of money is, because someone could say,
I'm constantly coveting after the possessions of people around me. I'm always wanting the new iPhone or the new this, that, or the third, and I'm constantly trading in my cars. I'm just constantly consumed by materialistic desires. But I don't love money. I don't want to marry it and move it down to the suburbs.
What? So we need to understand that the love of money is really materialism and greed. The love of money manifests itself in a lot of ways. You know, I'd like to make a video about online shopping because, especially during the pandemic, I think online shopping has really become something that is helping a lot of us cope with the isolation and not having as many things to go and see and do. It's a bit of a conflict in my mind because, on the one hand, I think it's important to care for our mental health, and maybe I shouldn't feel guilty for doing some small things that make me happy, like ordering some plants. But on the other hand, I think to myself, what could this money have done for the poor? And then I think about the people who can't even pay their bills and are getting evicted. So anyway, back to the point. When we're talking about the love of money, we're talking about idolizing it, we're talking about being obsessed with it, and maybe not it in and of itself, because we wouldn't love money if it weren't for the things that money did for us and can get for us. Jesus talks quite a lot about money. He says that we can't serve two gods, wealth and the actual God. And he also says that we need to build our treasure in heaven instead of on earth. He also talks quite a lot about generosity. For instance, there's a parable with vineyard workers, and the owner hires some workers in the morning, and then he hires some more workers in the afternoon, and at the end of the day, he pays them all the same thing. And the people who had been there since the morning were ticked off. And they were like, why are you giving these people who worked half the time that we did the same money as us? And the owner replied, well, you agreed to work for this amount of money, so are you just mad that I'm being generous towards other people? Good question. There's also the story of the sinful woman who spent all that money on that oil to anoint him, and then the disciples were condemning her, and then Jesus condemns them for condemning her. And that was an example of radical generosity. And here's a parable Jesus told of a rich fool that I'll actually read for you. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who sent me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What should I do, for I have no place to store my crops?" Then he said, "I'll do this. I'll pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool! This very night your life is being demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasure for themselves, but are not rich toward God." Moral of the story, don't stockpile. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Be generous.
So we see that explicitly and implicitly, Jesus talks about wealth and talks about how wealth can easily lead to greed and all kinds of evil. And it's all over the Old Testament too. The idea that we shouldn't put our trust and our love in wealth. We need to put our trust and our love to God. This is from Psalm 62. "Those of low estate are but a breath, and those of high estate are a delusion. In the balances they go up, they are together lighter than a breath. Put no confidence in extortion, and set no vain hopes on robbery. If riches increase, do not set your heart on them." And it's talked about so much in the Old Testament prophets. I mean, literally, when I'm flipping through these Old Testament prophets and I've got words written out in the margins, I'm seeing the words greed and materialism and vanity just over and over and over. But here's just a couple lines out of the book of Amos. "I will tear down the winter houses as well as the summer houses, and the houses of ivory shall perish, and the great houses shall come to an end. Hear this word, you cows of Bashan, who are on Mount Samaria, who oppress the poor, who crush the needy. Alas, for those who lie on beds of ivory, and lounge on their couches, and eat lambs from the flock and calves from the stall. They will be the first to go into exile, and the revelry of the loungers shall pass away." In both those verses, Amos was referring to rich people who have all of these fancy things, buying the poor for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals. Idolizing wealth and exploitation and materialism and greed is all condemned from front to back, Old Testament and New Testament. But isn't there a flip side to this? There are people with a lot of money who are really generous and good people. And there's so many of us who only imagine what a positive impact we can make on the world if we were wealthy. So here's some instructions for Christians who do have money. And funny enough, it's in the exact same chapter as that money being the root of all evil scripture. Further along in 1 Timothy 6. "As for those who in the present age are rich, command them not to be haughty or to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but rather on God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, generous and ready to share, thus storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of the life that really is life." So for those with a lot of money, or even for anyone who lives in a first world country nowadays, are we greedy and materialistic, or are we generous? Because if we dedicate our lives to God and serving our neighbors, and if we are generous and ready to share and ready to do good works, then we will take hold of the life that really is life. Is money the root of all evil? Not necessarily, but we have to be really careful not to fall into traps of being obsessed with what we can have and just being obsessed with ourselves in general. Life is about loving God and loving other people and helping other people. Thanks for listening, and God bless you all.